What's going on, Monarch Nation? This is episode 5. Can't believe it's been 5 episodes. Episode 5 of the Leo's House Party podcast, and we're thrilled to be back at you a little bit later in the week. We're trying to get you guys one episode per week as things start to get a little bit more busy around here, which is great, and that's what we're excited about. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Is the arrival of students on campus and first classes starting, and the community kind of getting back to normal, seeing each other and being safe in the way that things have been a little bit different on campus, of course, but it's still great to see. Campus is lively. It's great seeing everybody distancing and keeping their masks on and washing their hands. And I think the things that have been put into place to keep everybody safe so far, you start to see them have been fantastic when they're on campus. And kudos to the administration here at the college for a lot of the preparation that's gone into keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody here. The more I talk to our student athletes as I see them around campus, and I ask them how they're doing and how they think things have gone, and they say, things are actually pretty good right now. And the last thing they always say to me is, just don't send us home, please. And I think a lot of that's just going to come from the community. Is the safer that we are, and the more procedures that we abide by, then the safer it will be. And today, Joanne Kosick, who's the director of student health services here at King, sent out her first weekly COVID update. And as of right now, we only have one confirmed positive case on campus, which is great. And, think about having everyone come back to campus from all over the state, out of state. Kings has student athletes from all over the place, down in Florida, California, so all over the country, and to come back and only have one confirmed positive case on campus is great. So, I think that's a good start for the college. And, again, I think that the procedures that have gone into place, and they did a really nice job handing out the return to campus guide, which is also online. If you want to get to that, go to kings.edu, and you can check that out if you're a parent at home or a student that wants to take a look at it. But just a student guide for returning to campus, and it goes over all sorts of different things like expectations and guidelines, your personal responsibility, symptoms monitoring requirements, safety practices, mental health tips, and just living on campus with this. And I think it's been really great to see all of the combined efforts from everybody with signage on campus. And I think everyone's just starting to kind of get used to what we're dealing with right now. It's inconvenient, but this is the way that we have to go about it so that we can be around each other and still get an education. And then at some point, getting back to normalcy as things start to ease up, hopefully here, soon. And, there's always talk about vaccines and that coming down the pipeline, maybe later in October, November, December, as we approach the new year. I'm sure there's lots of people that are ready for 21 to get here, but, I think the impact of, what COVID has had on our campus, but then seeing, the preparation that people have done over the summer to make it safe for our Kings community to come back, and just how committed they are to the health and well-being of everybody on campus has been great. So I got a PAX show for you today. 3 guests, kind of from different eras, different backgrounds. First, Amy Kowalczyk, who is an athletic trainer here at Kings, 2016 graduate of the college in athletic training. Also got her master's at East Stroudsburg, and she's back here as an athletic trainer, former softball player as well. Got a chance to speak with her earlier in the week. Also last week, got a chance to talk to 1999 graduate Brian Compton, who's now the editing or deputy editor at the NHL.com, and he covers the New York Islanders. So we got a chance to talk a little hockey with him and just his experience here at Kings back in the late 90s. And then we'll finish up today with an interview we had a couple weeks back. Didn't get a chance to get to it last week. But, it was a really, really long interview and a really great talk with Dave McHugh from D3Hoops.com, who, we just sat and really talked basketball for, about 25 minutes about, how the landscape is going to be different, how he sees things kind of going this year. And then, just some great memories that he's had about covering the D3 level. So really, really engaging stuff, really entertaining stuff there from Dave, and we were excited to get him on. So I guess first now we'll go ahead and get to our first guest. Again, Amy Kowalczyk um, from athletic training here at Kings. Talked a little bit about her experiences, what she went through as an AT major, balancing softball with athletic training, and then just kind of what she loves about the job now. So we'll go ahead and send it on over to Amy Kowalczyk here on the Leo's House Party podcast. We're thrilled to have a current member of our staff with us today. She's been a Monarch as a student athlete as well. She was a 2-year captain of the Kings softball team, where she was voted All-MAC twice, as well as serving on the Student Athlete Advisory Committee here at Kings. She was a member and secretary of the Kings Sports Medicine Society and graduated from Kings cum laude with an athletic training degree. She then got her master's of athletic training at East Stroudsburg, where she was a GA for athletic training with the field hockey and softball teams. Now she's been working at Kings as an athletic trainer and also served as a certified athletic trainer at Geisinger. Let's welcome to the Leo's House Party podcast, Amy Kowalczyk.
Hi.
So first of all, I'd just love to hear how you kind of first found Kings out of high school and what made you want to go into athletic training.
So I found Kings because both of my athletic trainers at my high school went through the Kings. Well, my one high school athletic trainer went through the Kings program. And then the other athletic trainer that came in after her, she knew a lot of people that went through the athletic training program at Kings. And it was very reputable and very well known. So I spoke to them about it, kind of had an interest in it at first, but wasn't sure. And then I kind of shadowed them and realized this was one of my passions in life. So I chose to go to Kings just for the athletic training program. And I had the ability to play softball as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you were here, what about the athletic training major at Kings made it so easy for you to both play softball, but then also really prepared for that real world practicing later in life, in the field?
So the faculty was very understanding about the requirements to be an athletic trainer and to be a student athlete. They worked with you to get your clinical hours. My coach always worked with me, Lisa Gigliello. She was great about it. So just the team effort between everybody, constant communication with me and my preceptors and my teachers just to make it work, and time management wise really set it straight.
Amy, when you're in the athletic training program, obviously there's just so many levels to that. How was, the transitioning from like first to second to third and then your fourth year? How did it really set you up to, kind of be ready to just practice right out of college?
Each year challenged you differently at Kings. Sophomore year was really the foundation. Freshman year was kind of the intro to it, but sophomore year was definitely the foundation of being an athletic trainer. Come junior year, you're really learning all the hands-on stuff. That's probably one of the most important years to actually practice as an athletic trainer. And then senior year kind of just wraps it up. So they really prepare you in the clinical scenarios they put you through, the clinical hours, and then especially all the other opportunities they have outside of the program that they offer from the different clinical sites, so the high schools and the other colleges that you can go to. So they give you a vast amount of experience before you're able to even graduate.
Yeah, I always see some of the student athletes or students just everywhere, like out at high schools and different colleges. Mm-hmm. They're really broad the experience that they get there in that program. So, you were a 2-year captain and stand on the softball team with Coach Lisa, as you said. Without getting us into too much trouble, give us some of your best memories from being a King softballer.
I have so many. So definitely senior year, it was one of the most memorable years just with my 2 fellow classmates. So Rachel Linzo, Shelby Evie, just going through the whole 4 years with them. I think sophomore year was another memorable moment for me. I love the team. We went pretty far that year. It was just a fun environment to be around. Junior year had a whole new face of people on the team. We graduated a lot of people from sophomore year. So junior year was also a ton of fun. I mean, we were picked 6th in the conference, and we were able to fight back to get into playoffs, and we hosted playoffs. So it's awesome to experience it all. I couldn't even pick one scenario or situation from my 4 years of playing. There's just so many.
So during obviously this tough, situation that everybody is in during COVID, you actually had a chance to volunteer at the local hospital helping out with the COVID unit. I know you can't go too much into detail, but just how was that experience for you?
So it gave me a different perspective in the healthcare field. I mean, we all are healthcare workers as athletic trainers. Mm-hmm. So being in the ER setting was definitely a lot different than being in the athletic training room at King's. So just to be able to collaborate and work with other healthcare professionals was definitely a cool thing to experience. Got to learn a bunch of things they did on their side of the healthcare profession. So it was just awesome to intermingle with everybody and give back as we could.
As a sports information director, I know the long hours that you all put in, not just during games, but before and after practices. It's such a demanding profession, but also demanding major, so, what about, caring for student athletes really gets you going and makes you love what you do?
When I was looking for jobs, I was applying everywhere I could. That seemed interesting for me, but there was always something about Division III. Athletes at Division III, they're playing for the love of the game. They're not playing for a scholarship or any kind of perks, really. It's just all about the love of the game. So I like to work in this division just because you get to see the athlete's passion. You get to help them rehabilitate back to their new normal, better than before even. So it's nice to just have that connection and that relationship with those athletes to be able to pursue the sport they love and be a part of their journey.
So, when you're not at work, which, I'm assuming that's not a ton of the time, but like when you're not at work, what are you doing around the area to just kind of kick back, relax, and maybe shut your mind off a little bit?
So I did not think I was ever going to get into running after playing sports, but the first year I was out of college, so my grad school year, I actually found running to be very therapeutic for myself. Mm-hmm. So surprisingly, I love to run outside of here, but I also do love to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. So either I'm working out, watching Netflix, hanging out with my family, my boyfriend. I just got a puppy, so that's going to be my whole life right now, trying to train her.
You're like the third guest that just said they got a puppy that we've talked to. So it seems to be like the
must be a trend.
Yeah. So you said you've been watching some Netflix. Any shows you want to throw out to our listeners to check out?
So I am obsessed with Selling Sunset. It's so reality TV, but it's my guilty pleasure. So I highly recommend that one if you love the drama.
Okay, I haven't actually heard of that before, so I'll have to check that out. So, Amy, last question for you. You've been around the Wilkes-Barre area now for a while, and so, what's your go-to place to eat when you are just trying to grab something to eat on?
Gerry's Pizza, 100% Gerry's Pizza.
Gerry's Pizza. So you're a Gerry's person, not a.
Yeah, I grew up in South Wilkes-Barre, so I'm faithful to Gerry's.
Okay, well, there you go. That argument is, long as time, it seems like, with Gerry's and so.
There's a huge difference between Gerry's and Angela's. I'm just saying.
Well, it's funny because you either fall on one side or the other, and so people listening might not know, but there's this huge rivalry between Gerry's Pizza and Angela's. But you got to come out and decide for yourself, I guess. But Amy's going to say it's Gerry's. But so, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to hopefully at some point get back out on the fields competing, and I know what you and the other athletic trainers do here at King's is just so valuable to keeping our student athletes safe, and then unfortunately if they do have an injury, getting them back out on the fields and the court. So thank you so much for the work that you put in, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for having me today.
A special thanks to Amy Kowalczyk for joining us on the Leo's House Party podcast. It was a treat to talk to her. Just one of the many former graduates of athletic training here at King's that is now working here on campus. She's not. And we see that a lot across campus where graduates continue to work here in at the school. So it's great. It was great to talk to her and her experiences, and I'm sure that we'll see her on the sidelines whenever it is safe to be back out there competing. So thanks to Amy again. Some news that came out this past week from Division III and the NCAA was the administrative committee recommending that there be no competition in the fall term. And obviously here at King's, we had already decided that was going to be something that wasn't in our cards. But there were still some schools around the NCAA that were planning and still plan to play a limited schedule, or even some games here and there in the fall, as they could find opponents. There was, I think, only about 18% of Division III hadn't already canceled their entire fall semester for athletics, at least competition athletics. And so the administrative committee recommended that member schools not compete in the fall term to avoid potential health, and safety risks. I want to quote what Tori Murden McClure, who I've quoted before here, the chair of the President's Council, and she's the president at Spalding. She said, any competition this term in the current environment will increase the health and safety risks of not only our student athletes, but also coaches, staff, and campus communities. We have concerns of the potential health care cost exposure for member institutions if a student athlete contracts COVID-19 through athletically related activities. Today's actions will help ensure that member schools and student athletes make an informed decision regarding these issues. So along with that, I think that's important that, they're recommending that no schools compete. And I don't know if it's from a competitive standpoint or anything like that. I really don't think there's any competitive advantage of competing. I think they're just looking out to say, I don't think this is the right climate to have competition. And since there are member schools that are still thinking about doing it, they felt that it was prudent to go ahead and send that out. They also took two other relevant directives from the Board of Governors. One was the committee adopted non-controversial legislation effective immediately that institutions may not require student athletes to waive their legal rights regarding COVID-19 as a condition of participating in athletics. And it also clarified that for this academic year, all full-time enrolled student athletes who opt out, so if a student athlete decides not to engage in any activity during or after the first contest, would get 2 semesters or a 3-quarter extension on their clock or their playing career if they decide to use that. So not different pretty much than the blanket waiver they had already announced. Just a little clarification with that. And that was put out back on the 21st, so August 21st, so about 5 days ago as we recorded this. But again, more legislation from the NCAA, just trying to make sure that the well-being of our student athletes at this level is taken care of. And we've talked multiple times here on this podcast about what the NCAA has gone through, and we had an opportunity to talk to Dan Dutcher last week, and he really let us know about how painstaking it has been to make these decisions through the Board of Governors and the Administrative Committee and the President's Council and all those groups. And he really said that canceling seasons and championships is the last resort. And I mean, he was very adamant about that when we chatted a couple weeks ago, and he said that the two hardest days in his career is when he canceled both last year's spring sports and winter championships, and also the fall championships this year. I mean, these are decisions that are not made lightly, and but there are tough decisions. And with this climate, it's great to see that there are some decisions being made out there and making hard decisions. Sometimes there are governing bodies that don't want to make a tough decision, and just allow the member schools to just make the call. And I think that kind of puts you in a tough situation if you're a school. Plus, you might not have anybody to play. We see it right now with the PIAA that some schools in the area here are deciding not to play in the fall. Carbondale being one of which, I just off the top of my head, has said they are not playing fall sports and they are not revisiting the issue. They're just, scorched earth on that. They are out. Some other schools that have already suspended sports, Hanover area, just off the top of my head, I think Scranton Prep also just announced that they were going to suspend athletics for right now. And so it makes it a little bit harder for some of these schools in the area to get games, but it was good that the NCAA is really just trying to push forward that there's no advantage in trying to play this fall. Let's make sure that everyone's safe, healthy, and then hopefully we can get back out there here in the spring. And hopefully, here in the fall, we can still train. It's been great to see our student athletes in the gym, shooting basketballs and, lifting safely, and even some volleyball going on and some other stuff. So trying to be safe while, still exercising and preparing themselves to compete when it becomes safe to do so. So I think now would be a good time to send on over to our second guest of this week's Leo's House Party podcast. And this is a guy who, went to Kings back in the late 90s and now is working for NHL.com and covering the New York Islanders, who are just steamrolling right now through the playoffs. And so it was really good to talk to him. He's been working around the Islanders for a long time now. And so it was great to just get his perspective on what it's like to cover an NHL team, some of the people here on campus that were really influential to him, and just kind of how he got to where he is today. So now it'd be a good time to send it on over to Brian Compton, class of 1999, here on the Leo's House Party podcast. Well, we're thrilled to have another alumni here on the Leo's House Party podcast. This former Monarch has been the deputy managing editor of NHL.com for the last 13 years, covering hockey in the NYC area, but mostly the New York Islanders. Before that, he was a beat writer and sports editor at the Trentonian, and also has served as a sports editor and reporter at the Southampton Press and New York Post, a communications and journalism major while he was at King's and a graduate in 1999. We'd love to welcome to the Leo's House Party podcast, Brian Compton. So I guess, first of all, before we get into the hockey, I just want to take you back to 1994 and 1995 and just how you got, made your way to King's.
Yeah, my older sister, she's 2 years older than me, she visited King's when she was looking around at school. She ended up going to Scranton, but my mom, who was with her for the visit, she kind of put King's in her back pocket. She thought it'd be a good spot for me. I was more of I needed that, intimate environment, 15 to 20 student kind of a deal instead of a large lecture. I don't think I would have thrived in that kind of environment. So when we went to visit, I loved it, and some of the best years of my life for sure.
Yeah, you were part of the communications program, which has been so successful here at King's. I think one of our best programs, if you talk to people around campus. What was your experience like, and how did that set you up for kind of what you're doing now?
It was great. Doc Musari, rest in peace. I know he passed away a couple of years ago. He and I had a great relationship. He and Joe Plummer and Jane Kleiner, there was just so many really, really good teachers who genuinely cared about their students, and it was just a great situation. And working for the Crown since my freshman year, I was sports editor as a sophomore, co-editor in chief towards the end. It was just a lot of fun, really good people that I got to work with. Even my colleagues in the communications department, my fellow students, they were all really, really special people. I got to see a few of them last fall for our 20-year reunion. It was a lot of fun and just great memories.
That's great. Yeah. It's great that the Crown's still going and it's still thriving on campus. And I'll have to go back and check out some of your stuff now that I know you're on that. So, obviously it's a really busy time for you right now with the playoffs going on. And, just, I guess, how difficult was it for you with during the quarantine with just so much uncertainty?
Yeah, it was tough just because we didn't know what was going to happen with our season. Were they going to cancel it? How long is this? I mean, the pandemic's still going. Fortunately, New York is doing really, really well. Everybody's wearing a mask and, doing their social distance and everything else. But from our perspective, we had no idea until probably, I want to say June. We had no clue until June. So it was just a really tough time for everybody. People are losing their jobs left and right. It's just a really horrible situation. But fortunately for us, the league kept everybody on board, and they've done a remarkable job. I know I'm biased when I say this, but they've done a really, really remarkable job in the bubbles in Toronto and Edmonton. No positive tests over, I think it's been 3 weeks now. So it's great.
Yeah, you talk about the teams being in the bubble, Brian. Has it been harder for you for coverage? Because normally you're sitting in the arena at the place a lot of the times, but has it been harder for you to get coverage, and how are NHL teams going about getting information to you so that you can put it out, online?
Yeah, covering games hasn't changed all that much. You can't really see plays develop the same, so that's a bit of a challenge. The biggest challenge trying to cover this series and every other series that's going to follow here is you don't get that player access in the locker room. You don't get to stray away from, where the whole contingent is, as opposed to sometimes I'll walk away and I'll talk to somebody else one-on-one for 5 to 10 minutes. You don't get that access, right? So that's very difficult. But the league's done a great job with Zooms pregame and postgame to get guys to talk to us, and the coaches talk every day. So that makes things pretty easy for us. You
focus mainly on the Islanders, who are moving on into the second round after a 4-1 drubbing of my Caps. I guess, I would love to hear, like, how did you get, were the Islanders a team that you were really interested in, or that you grew up following, and how did you kind of get onto that beat once you joined NHL.com?
Yeah, my dad covered them for the Daily News, the third and fourth Cup years. So he would take me to practice when I was 5, 6 years old. So even back then, Jamie, I knew I wasn't going to be a pro athlete when I grew up. So I thought that would be the next best thing, and really just followed in his footsteps. I interned. He worked at the Post towards the end of his career, and I interned there my senior year at Kings. And I just got along with the sports editor. I did everything I could to keep my name in his memory while I was a senior. And I was just fortunate enough. Somebody had quit probably 3 weeks before graduation, and he called me and said, I have a clerk job if you want it. And I started 3 days after I graduated. So it just all worked out for me.
Well, that's fantastic. We're here with Brian Compton from NHL.com and former Monarch. And Brian, obviously during your time with, working in hockey, I'm sure you've met some pretty amazing people during your time. Can you give us just maybe a few players or coaches that you've really just enjoyed covering?
Oh, man. Well, going back to my days in the ECHL when I covered Trenton, Mike Haviland was their coach when they won the Kelly Cup in 2005. We've been really good friends ever since then. He's now the head coach at Colorado College, but he won the Stanley Cup with Chicago as an assistant in 2010. So that was a really cool moment because I covered that series, and I was on the ice with him afterwards when they were celebrating and just talking to him. And he thanked me for everything I did for him. Like, Mike, I didn't do anything. This is all you, buddy. Good for you. And things have really worked out for him. Barry Trotz, who's now obviously the Islanders head coach, he's a really, really special person. You can just tell that he's a really good guy. And then from a player's perspective, Jamie, I mean, the Islanders are really finally starting to turn the corner here. I've been covering them for about 10 years. The start of it, things weren't going very well, but the one thing that they always got right was just the quality of person that they would have in their locker room, going back to guys like Travis Hamonic, Matt Martin, who's here now, Josh Bailey, Andrews Lee. The list goes on and on. Really, really, really good people who make my job as easy as possible.
Watching that team from afar, I lived in New York for a while and having a chance to watch lots of Islanders games as a Cavs fan, always felt like that team was always very tight. And when you bring in someone like Barry Trotz, who, obviously he was a cup winner with the Caps, and seeing what he did with that culture, it's really exciting to see what he's doing with the Islanders right now. So I guess, right now with the Islanders, how far do you see them going? Obviously now into the second round. We're not sure who they're going to be playing, but how far do you think this team can go?
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't know who they're playing yet because they don't match up well with the Bruins at all. I don't know if they can beat Boston, but I do think that they can beat Philly. They have been so good 5-on-5. It's really ridiculous how good they are, just shutting down the offense. Even last night, the Cap season's on the line, and they held them to 20, 21 shots. It's just ridiculous what they're doing. So it really, I think, hinges on the opponent here. I don't know if they can get past Boston, but it's nothing against Philly, but they did go 3-0 against them during the regular season. The Flyers have a really good team. Carter Hart's going to be a really good goalie in this league for a long time. But I think if the Islanders stick to their identity here, it could be a really fun summer for fans.
Yeah, I think the Metro is going to be just a great a great division to watch over the next 5 years. Maybe the Caps taking some steps back with getting a little older, but like with the Rangers getting better, the Islanders look like they're young, they're still exciting, and even Carolina. So it's a good time to be a Metro fan right now. So I guess the last question for you, Brian, is if there's any advice you could give to maybe some present Monarchs that are looking to break into a field of interest like you did after graduation, what would it be?
Don't take no for an answer, and don't think that you can't do it. I'm proof of it. I wasn't the greatest high school student. Kings took a chance on me. I'm hoping that I'm paying them back in the best way possible here. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to, even if you're a writer like myself at your age, guys, you got to write for free if you have to, just to get your name out there to as many people as possible. You never know who's going to see it, and if you're good, they're going to notice.
Well, Brian, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. Obviously, a real busy time for you, but it was a pleasure to speak with you. I hope the Isles can continue this run for you here in the playoffs. It's been exciting. So, but we'll have to catch back up with you, down the road.
Anytime, Jamie. Thanks for having me, buddy. All the best.
A big thank you to Brian Compton from NHL.com and 1999 graduate here of King's College for joining us on the Leo's House Party podcast. His Islanders, I wouldn't say his Islanders, but the Islanders, the team he covers, quick work of the Caps, and then took that first game against the Flyers. They actually think they might have already played game 2 by the time you hear this. So, but they were already up 1-0 after that 4-0 win over the Flyers. And good call on him. He said, I think the matchup against the Flyers was a good matchup for him. And so far, it seems like he might have been right about that. So, I wanted to take a look at the NBA. We're going to talk basketball with Dave McHugh here in a little bit. But I think the NBA basketball bubble has really delivered. We talked about the WNBA. Basketball just over there has been fantastic. But I wanted to talk a little bit of NBA playoffs and some things I thought were pretty intriguing. And first on the list was right out of the gate, both number 1 seeds lose their first game. The Lakers go down, and then to the Trailblazers, and then the Bucks lose to the Magic, and just kind of right out of the gate, and it's that's just kind of the parity of the NBA, but also in this bubble you just don't know, and so that was interesting. Since then the 2 number 1 seeds have kind of taken over and righted the ship a little bit, but the playoffs have been pretty exciting, and what can you say about Giannis? The guy is just unstoppable. LeBron has been great too, but those first games, the Magic, really got a 12-point win over the Bucks, and the Lakers are kind of out of it, and then they've kind of righted the ship again. So that that was something I thought was pretty interesting. Also, just how good the Raptors have looked, and I think the Raptors got this. The stigma of being a more defensive team. They have played pretty solid defense. They held the Nets to under 100 points twice in that series, but they scored over 130 points twice, 150 in that game to sweep the series. But what a job that Nick Nurse has done with that team after a championship. Kawhi leaves, and they still end up getting that first round sweep over the Nets, and we'll see who they end up getting here in the second round. But a lot of credit to the second-seeded Raptors, who are starting to make a claim that they are still the best team in the East. And the play of all those guys. Getting the people off the bench like Norman Powell and Serge Ibaka have been fantastic. It's just such a deep team for the Raptors. Not even talking about Lowry or any of those other guys. Van Fleet. That team is super deep. So on the other side of the ball, just what a letdown by the Sixers. I know this is kind of a Philly area here in Northeast Pennsylvania, but the Sixers get swept by the Celts, and obviously tough without Ben Simmons, but Brett Brown is immediately fired right after that series, and the Sixers just couldn't score. You have guys like Tobias Harris that really just didn't shoot the ball very well. They didn't get a ton of production outside of Embiid, really. And, I think the process really just didn't kind of come together how they really wanted it to. So, obviously injuries hurt the Sixers, and it hurt kind of the chance of Brett Brown sticking around. So Celtics move on in that series. And, in the other series in the Heat, how about in the East, how about the Heat? Can win games by scoring. They've got great depth. That's a team that I think in a couple of years could be very good. I think they've got one of the best big men in the NBA, and Adebayo, and just a good squad. They can score 125 points and beat you. They can score 99 and beat you. They defend extremely well, and they've got guys like Duncan Robinson, former D3 player, and get to him in the pod and when we were talking to Dave as well. But really just kind of locked up the Pacers, couldn't do much, and the Heat picked up the sweep. So 3 sweeps in the East, really kind of dominant performances, and so we'll see how the East kind of goes from here on out. In the West, Dame's doing as much as he can against the Lakers, but it looks like the Lakers going to move on. The 2 series that are really good so far is the Jazz and Nuggets. Jamal Murray, him and Mitchell have been just back and forth. That one game where they both scored 50. That was a fun game to watch. And then you've got the Mavs and Clippers, and Doncic single-handedly trying to keep his team in that series. I think the Clippers pull away and win that series, but the Nuggets right now up 3-2 on the Jazz. and the Jazz up 3-2 on the Nuggets. And then in the other series, it's 2-2. So, kind of two different sides. The East, a little bit more one-sided. The West, you've got some really competitive series with the Rockets and Thunder. Thunder, I think people sleep on how good the Thunder really are. Gilgeous-Alexander, a really good player. Dort has kind of, really put the gloves there on Harden. It's fun to watch that matchup. Just one of the best scorers in the league against a guy who he really loves to defend. And you don't see that a ton anymore in the NBA game. So that's a great matchup to watch. The Rockets won the first two. Thunder come back, win the next two. And we'll see where that series goes. Best of three kind of coming up here over the next couple days. But should be an exciting, rest of the playoffs, but certainly a really fun first round here, especially in the West. So we'll see what ends up happening. But continuing the basketball talk, we're going to go ahead and send it over to our third and final guest of this week's Leo's House Party podcast, a guy that's been covering basketball at the D3 level for over 20 years now. He went to a Division III school. He's been around it for a long time. Just somebody who's going to be as knowledgeable about the game, both on the men's and women's side, as it possibly gets. So it was a pleasure to bring on Dave McHugh from D3Hoops.com, and we'll go ahead and send him on over to him now on the Leo's House Party podcast. Well, what a thrill it is today to have one, I'd say, the preeminent voice on Division III basketball with us today. He's a graduate of Goucher College. He's been part of the creative team at D3Sports.com for, I guess, what's coming up on 20 years now, it seems like, creating the only talk show dedicated to Division III basketball hoopsville. He also created the show YD3 Show in September of 2014, shining light on student athletes, coaches, and teams within the division. He's a broadcaster, director, producer, host, among many other things. And we'd love to welcome to the Leo's House Party podcast, Dave McHugh.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so first of all, Dave, obviously it's been a tough, 6-7 months here, with everything going on. Just want to get your overall take on how you think the President's Council and the Management Council has handled everything with the COVID crisis, at the Division III level.
Yeah, I think they've handled it as best as can be expected. Could the decision have happened sooner? Sure. We can always hem and haw over that, but, I think they gave it as much time as the whole NCAA was going to have. I think at one point there was a thought that the entire NCAA was going to speak with one voice. And when that became less and less clear or less and less apparent, I think Division III decided, okay, enough. This is going to be our decision. And to be honest with you, even if the Board of Governors had said, yeah, we're going to move forward, I think Division III was going to pull the plug. So I think Division III, we had a point where we didn't have enough schools who are going to be participating, to be blunt.
Right.
And so you just can't have championships. And then instead of saying, hey, we'll postpone, no, they just said canceled. And I think that was a smart decision as well. I think they're fully aware that if they gave an opening in the spring, it was going to be a very unfair opening for a lot of schools. There are schools who we'll probably get to it later, but there are schools who just can't handle trying to do everything in the spring. So I think they've done what they could. I think there was a lot of hope, let's say in June, for just a random date, that things would be good enough to move forward, even if things were restricted. Yeah, that it would be a good enough moment to be able to move forward and have the championships and control things and whatnot. And I think since that point, things came unraveled to some degree. So, I think they did as best as could be done considering the circumstances. They're just the last ones in the line who finally had to make that decision, because they're always the last ones in the line by design to make that decision.
Yeah, Dave, you dropped your Midsummer podcast episode of Hoopsville yesterday, so head on over and check that out.
Finally.
For our followers. And, what was the overall feeling from your guests on the show about everything? Like, how are they holding up, and how are they, communicating to their constituents and their teams?
Yeah, we had Philip Ponder on from Oglethorpe, men's basketball coach. And we had Jason Fine, athletics director at Bates, who's on the management council, to be chair in January, and also Gordon Mann from D3 Hoops. I think there's mixed feelings. Right. I think if you talk to individuals, especially them, but anybody I talk to, deep down there's this disappointment and this feeling of, I can't believe we're in this situation. We really thought we could get out of this, or not get out of it. That's not even the right term, but we could be doing something for our student athletes. And it's about the student athletes that they care about. It's not the coach in the grand scheme of things. Yes, we've got coaches who want to be out on the court or on the field or whatever and competing as much as their student athletes, but they feel bad for the men and women that they have on their campus and on their teams who are losing seasons. Essentially,
right,
when it's all said and done in 2020, we will have not had any NCAA championships, if you think about it, because winter sports got pulled. The weekend, some of those championships were to be crowned.
Exactly.
And some, shortly thereafter. All of spring got pulled, and now all of fall have gotten pulled. The next championship won't be until 2021. The last one, if memory serves correctly, was the 2019 Stag Bowl.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people out there, and I think my guests are among them, who wished we hadn't gotten to this point. And Jason Fine talks about the fact he had 10 plans, figuring at worst we're throwing 8 or 9 of these out. And he said, I've thrown all 10 out.
Yeah.
I'm constantly starting over, and not because the virus has been maybe different or mutated or changed or whatever. It's because we haven't, and I think that's the frustration. And then the other thing that's huge in Division III, we run from Maine to California,
right?
Washington down to the Carolinas. There are a lot of different schools and a lot of different circumstances and a lot of different places, and it makes for more complicated than it becomes easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a good point there, Dave, is that, just the way some schools are, and the, looking at Bowdoin, for instance, is going to be different than what an NC Wesleyan might be doing. So like those schools have such a different profile that it's hard to make blanket decisions for everybody. So totally a really good point there. With most conferences and schools now going to, moving everything to winter, from the winter to starting in the second semester, how do you think that changes the way the season ultimately ends up going, assuming that it eventually does get going?
If we're talking specifically basketball, I think you've got one of 3, to make it simple, one of 3 options on the table. You've got on the table, everything's normal, but everybody, or majority of people, will start late. I think there will be some, if nothing has changed, there will be some who will try and pull something off in November. I saw some women's team was looking in the central part of the country, was looking to fill its basketball tournament in November. And I remember thinking, and this was just recently, and I remember thinking to myself, good luck with that.
Yeah.
I think there will be some, if we don't change anything, who will try and do that and will continue their seasons normal. And I mean that on the schedule side, not on their schedule, what I mean on our calendar side. And then there will be a whole bunch who will hopefully start in January. This is, let's just say, all things, going forward are okay at this point. No further decisions need to be made. With, the regular season ending at the end of February and the championship happening late March, and as we normally would have. But as a result, a lot of schools will only have had a very small section of time to play games. They'll only be conference games. They may get 50% in, which is now the minimum, thankfully. Mm-hmm. I thought that's where President's Council, Management Council, everybody else has done a tremendous job of adjusting things, saying, okay, you know what? Let's just make this simple. If you play 50% of your games, then your season will count towards everything. And that's the big picture and the small picture. The small picture being towards your championships, the big picture counting your sponsorships towards NCAA membership. So that's a nice blanket statement. 50% is also the waiver for student athletes to get their year back. Great. Very simple decisions there. I thought those are tremendous. So that's what we could have. That's the one if nothing changes. But as a result, we're going to have NCAA tournament teams who are, 20-5, and NCAA tournament teams who are 14-2.
Right.
Or you're going to have 7-7 teams because they ended up going on a run at the end and winning their their conference championship.
Right.
And it's going to be hodgepodgey. And we don't want that, but that might be, if nothing changes, how it looks. The second option is that everybody starts in January and that nothing changes. And we have a 6-week sprint, all conference based, which some conferences you won't play everybody. You won't even come close to it. And now we're heading into the tournament. We'll get to the thought I had there in a second. And it's chaos. I don't want even chaos, but just confusion.
Right.
Now, who is the best team in the country? How do you bracket? Well, it's going to be bracketed regionally. The third option being what we talked about on my show. There's this plan that's out there that's not necessarily in front of the NCAA yet, but I'm sure it will be soon, where we shift everything. And we say, okay, we start in January, but now we won't end the regular season until the end of March, beginning of April. And then we play our NCAA tournament. As a result, you'll lose about a month of the season because you'll lose some of your preseason and you lose a chunk on the back end of the season as well. But you also gain time at the end too. So you kind of give and you take. So basically everybody comes back January 1-ish. You practice, you start playing January 15th. You play games until the end of March, which that way you can get in maybe about 20 games. Some schools may try to aim higher.
Right.
And then you play your postseason and you have at least a little bit more of a normal season. So those are the three options I see out there. What are we heading towards? I have no idea right now. Talk to me tomorrow. I might have a different opinion on this. I like the January idea, but I know there's challenges with that. There's a lot of pros and cons to it, a lot of cons, especially what it does for schools.
Yeah.
For example, the amount of student athletes, especially with the spring that would be going then in March, can be a little bit detrimental to schools. Well, one idea that the coach says is, okay, we normally say 1 day off for student athletes. Let's make it 2. Let's take an extra day off the burden. And at the same time, our student athletes, our coaching staffs, et cetera, can help our schools try and facilitate everything that's going on. So at least there's that kind of thinking. Will it happen? I have no idea, because we're here in August right now. And the fact that I don't know if we're starting practices in 2 months and starting the season in 3 months, let alone 6, is mind-blowing to me. Normally August, I'm sitting there going, all right, yeah, I got a couple months to get ready, and those couple months will be over, and I'll be like, where'd the time go? Right now, I'm going to be wondering, when are we starting?
Yeah,
that answered that question.
As an SID, I think it's, we're kind of ramping back into things right now. Right now would be the time that football teams are coming back, and you're really starting to kind of get that coverage going, and we just don't know what's going to end up happening. I think you bring up a really good point, is those 6 weeks, or that 6 to 7 weeks where you have those January plan. I mean, it could be really exciting, but you could be really putting on some, if it goes any longer, it goes into March, administration and staff can be really stretched thin. But, it's something I think at this level, the staffs would be willing to do and excited to do.
I'll be honest with you, I'm torn on that. Let's look at the even bigger picture here. There's a lot of conferences, a lot of schools that have promised that they're going to move their fall sports to the spring. Now, understand the caveat here. I want all your listeners to understand the caveat of 50%. If a team and a student athlete being on that team has decided to play, but whether they play or not, the 50% of games, once they hit that mark, that blanket waiver is gone.
Right.
So those student athletes use up the eligibility. And so I think that 50% mark is the magic number. And I think you've seen a few things here. One, there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of, we're looking to the spring. I won't say promises, because I don't think anybody's promised spring, but they certainly have alluded that they will move fall sports to spring.
Right.
Let's be blunt. Let's say you're a football school, which you guys certainly are, and you also have lacrosse.
Yep.
You also had soccer in the fall, right? You probably had field hockey for some of those in the Northeast and some scattered around the country. So now you've got primarily one field. Maybe you're lucky enough to have a second just for games. You're going to pull off men's, women's lacrosse, football, men's and women's soccer, maybe additional field hockey, all at the same time in a very small window. And hopefully you don't normally get snow, because you're not going to even get on those fields for a long period of time. Let's take Johns Hopkins as my favorite example. Everybody looks at Johns Hopkins, lots of money. It's a big school, huge endowment. Great. They have one field for men's and women's lacrosse, men's and women's soccer, field hockey, and football. One field. That's it. By the way, lacrosse is king because it's a D1 program, and technically the two programs aren't supposed to be crossing. So lacrosse is going to take priority. Okay, so now you got to figure out a schedule where everybody plays games during the week. Everybody has practices during the week. What about locker room access? Johns Hopkins doesn't necessarily have a locker room for every single person or every single team to use for the entire year. What about athletic trainers? What about sports information? What about game operations? you're putting a ton of weight on the spring and a ton of pressure on the spring to get everything accomplished. And we haven't talked about how the coronavirus may add on top of that, of making sure you're distanced, making sure you're cleaning, making sure we don't even have to get in the list. So that's the big picture. Now add winter shifting as well. Yes, indoor, I get it. But again, you still have the demand on sports information and on athletic trainers and on game day ops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to see it happen, but I'm also very realistic of the fact there's a lot of schools in Division III. You talk about the Bowdens and the Johns Hopkins and all them with a ton of endowment. There are schools who are also trying to just trying to keep their doors open. Right. And this decision in the fall could hurt them, and trying to even pull off the spring could absolutely destroy them financially. So now you're looking at a very unbalanced division where you have the haves and the have-nots. So this is why, by the way, the Management Council, Championship Committee, and President's Council all said canceled default championships. They didn't want to encourage that idea. So if we see anything in the spring, I think you're going to see max 50%. I think you see a couple schools trying to at least acknowledge their seniors, give them a couple football games, maybe give them a couple soccer games if they can. We didn't even talk about the volleyballs in all the world. Right. They'll try and do that. The trick is, will they allow basketball to slide to dive into that spring with the final caveat? The spring athletes and a lot of the winter athletes, but a lot of the spring athletes lost their season last year. Yeah. We move everything on top of them. You could argue they're losing their season again. So this is a very complicated situation. And as much as I agree with you, and I think it would be exciting, I know I would be busy. My wife would appreciate that. I would be working. I'd have lots of things to go cover, lots of things to because I do broadcasting for a couple of small colleges. I'd certainly be busy this spring. But the bigger picture of this all is, I don't know if that's fair to do to colleges or to student athletes. Or, I mean, there's a list of people that makes that probably a little bit more challenging than it seems. Slide basketball, slide ice hockey, slide swimming and diving, etc. Wrestling, yeah, possibly. Open up the entire window, which that would open, gets a little scarier.
Yeah, Dave, it's a good point. I got a question for you in terms of, the NCAA lately has been trying to prioritize the health and safety of its student athletes. They just have put out some releases about that, allowing for an opt-out option as well. Do you think that's something that we'll see at this level? We were already seeing it at the Division I level a little bit, but, with, different priorities, I would say at this level for some of our student athletes, do you think that's something we end up seeing?
Yeah, I mean, let's look back at the spring when they put out the blanket waiver for student athletes saying you can come back, and mainly everybody was looking at it as your seniors. You can come back and complete your senior year. I mean, juniors, you can get a fourth year. Sophomores, you can get a fourth year. Consider that. We haven't even talked about those athletes who basically will have 3-year terms. A lot of student athletes, one, probably can't afford to spend another year in college just to make sure that they get their dreams of playing. And you're talking to a former student athlete, whether I look like it or not, who would died to have had another year of playing, but also knew it was time to move on to some degree, physically too. They've got jobs lined up. They've got careers to go to, and they may not be able to afford to pay for college. Sure, D1, they're doing it because the scholarships are guaranteed. Well, to some degree. There are some rules in place, and I don't want to dive in too much into D1 because I haven't been paying attention as much, but there is some rules in place of guaranteeing the scholarships if they take the opt-out, which it sounds simple. People look at football and basketball and go, oh, yeah, there's scholarship. Well, football and basketball are the only ones that are guaranteed a full ride. Everybody else, it's split up scholarships. So you might get a quarter scholarship. So you're going to have student athletes having to make the decision of whether they come back to college now, which is probably a decision on their health too. Then will they pick back up and be an athlete, or do they already have a job on the horizon? Do they have a career on the horizon that precludes this from happening in the first place? Or can they just not afford it in an economy that's tanking to begin with? Right. So it's great. It's a nice option. You will certainly see some student athletes in Division III take advantage of it. Don't get me wrong. But it will not become, I don't think, a norm in any way, shape, or form. unfortunately, some of the great student athletes of Division III are going to go out without having played that final year we were all looking forward to, because, to be blunt, they got better things to do. And I don't mean that as a knock at their athleticism or the teams, but what is the NCAA saying? You know, going pro in something other than sports. That's the truth in Division III, is it not?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great idea, and I think it needs to be there, but I don't think you're going to see it run rampant in the division.
Yeah, I think a lot of our coaching staff here, when we've had meetings, have said that a lot of our athletes that are in the higher, rigorous academic sides, they're not going to be able to take time off, and so any athletic events that they can get in, while they're there, they'd rather try to take advantage of it. That's so scheduling, 10 to 12 field hockey games, for instance, would be something they'd be interested in the spring.
Well, and that's where I think you see the one or two football games, like a home and home against somebody, or you might see 2 or 3 soccer games or 2 or 3 field hockey games. I don't think you're going to see 10 to 12, because I think you're doing a disservice to the rest of your student athletes. You're basically telling those who want to do it, they got to completely opt out of the year.
Yeah.
Because otherwise that 50% rule kicks in and they're going to lose it. But again, we can also go back to my comments about the pressure that puts on, because remember, we're not playing outdoor sports in a majority of Division III from January to May or February to May. We're playing them from maybe mid-March to May. I played baseball in high school, and I was in New England, either Maine or Connecticut. And in Maine, the joke, I remember coming home one year from a spring break with my parents, and there was snow on the ground in mid-April. And I remember thinking to myself, geez, we had May and June at least at that point, but our entire seasons got squeezed into 6 weeks. It's just not possible. And that's the other thing. You're just not going to see the numbers of games played like normal. But I think it's disingenuous for any coach or any administration to turn to their athletes and say, hey, stay for another year. When they're paying for it in some way, shape, or form, whether their family are paying for it, whether they got to apply for more financial aid, whether they got to apply for more grants, whether they've got to somehow work some more hours to apply for a whole nother year. College is not cheap as we know it, even if it's the non-sticker price, if it's the discounted price, it's still not cheap. And as much as I want to see our student athletes perform out there, college isn't going to be free for that extra year. So I think that's something that people have to realize. And of course, moving on to a career too. And if we all get older.
Hey, Dave, I want to shift away from kind of what's going on at the moment and just, you've been part of some amazing moments at the Division III level for basketball, but, is there a moment or maybe an interview or a game that you've called or you've done that really sticks out for you as one that is very memorable for? I mean, you've been around a ton of them. So just anything.
Yeah. Thanks for dating me. No. I look good for 30, don't I? I mean, there's a lot of things that stand out. My first Final Four in Division III basketball, men's basketball, Salem Civic Center, 2001. Irony, my school's arch rival won the national championship, Catholic winning it. Of course, my colleague, Pat Coleman's alma mater. So I got to witness that. I already knew the head coach, so I felt like I was connected to it, which I think helped make that a passion. I have not missed a Final Four since.
That's
Still
awesome.
this year. Thanks, coronavirus. We all missed it. There's so many great championships. Tonton Belenga for Virginia Wesleyan hitting a jumper at the top of the key for a 3 to win it for Virginia Wesleyan. William Stevens Point championship game, which went back and forth in the last minute. Stevens Point hits a shot on a runner. Williams nearly hits the game winner, but it was only 0.2 of a second. It wouldn't have counted anyway. You can fast forward to seeing Duncan Robinson nearly win a championship for Williams in his freshman year. Head coach and he end up going elsewhere that year, and now look at where Duncan Robinson is. I mean, geez, so many championships, so many great games, so many great players. There's some, Ben Strong, I called a game where he scored 51 points in a triple overtime game. I called it. Unfortunately, the top 10 game that followed in the Sweet 16 didn't live up to expectations, but then the bar just got raised significantly by Ben Strong and Jordan Snipes in what ended up being the last game for Lincoln in Division III basketball. there's so many, but then that 51-point game was eclipsed a couple of years ago by Francis, who put up, what was it, 60, I think, in the Elite Eight game, which also went to overtime, just not triple. And he takes Wheaton, Illinois, all the way to the Final Four. So many things in basketball. In soccer, I've had the honor of calling 4 championships on the men's and women's side. Unfortunately, that pulled this year. But last year, the Final Four was tremendous. Insane games across the board. I've called women's lacrosse for the last, I think, 5 out of 6 years it was, or 4 out of 5. I've actually lost track because this May was supposed to count, and that was a number I had stuck in my head. But some tremendous women's lacrosse games. I've seen some tremendous men's lacrosse games. You know, working at Stevenson and seeing 2 of the best teams in the country in Stevenson and Salisbury squaring off once or twice a year was always fun to watch. I've actually seen a lot. I don't know if I could nail it down to one in terms of what I've seen on a court that has been so fun. But I think interview-wise, the list is long there. I appreciate the fact that I've been able to interview Dan Dutcher, Vice President of Division III, multiple times and consider him a friend that he would be willing to come on and just have an hour-long conversation. That may sound long, but we cover everything we can. The fact that some of the best coaches in Division III, Glenn Robinson, Dave Hicks, and et cetera, are a phone call away to have on the show means a lot to me. There was a point where we were doing this show from a studio near me here, not in my own house, where I had a buddy of mine, and we sat there with the scores, and we're like, oh, yeah, let's all right, so-and-so beat so-and-so, and so-and-so beat so, and we read off scores for 5 minutes and thought that was a really good basketball show. It was a really bad basketball show. But Pat Coleman knew we took it seriously. It's gone from there. When the show rejuvenated after a short time off, I will never forget the first night because I went to take a nap. I was working overnights at the time at a TV station. And I used to be a TV producer in local news, and I was working overnights, and I went home, tried to take a nap, something I never did after this fact. And I woke up and I had a bunch of voicemails. I'm like, what is going on? And it turns out Cabrini's men's basketball coach had basically been told by his president at the beginning of January, see ya, we'll let you coach out the year, but you're done after this. And I had John Zeke slammed into the show that night. We have more interviews than we do now, or we have more interviews now than we did then, so it was easy to move him into the show. Right. So we bring Hoopsville back after a short layoff, and the first story out of the gate is this major story of a significant basketball coach told by his president that he's not coming back for whatever political reasons were going on Cabrini's campus. I don't remember the content, but I remember the segment, and I remember the show, and I remember how much that influenced Hoopsville's return and staying on the air, and how much other people saw it as a result of that. I'll never forget that one for sure. I think that one will stand out more than even the first show we ever did. That feels more like the first show we ever did. And I'm just honored that we can keep doing it. We get so much support to do it. We need more support, to be blunt, because there's bills to be paid. We did a great fundraiser this last year, and then coronavirus hit. And guess what? We upgraded the computer because we had no choice, but we haven't been able to upgrade anything else. Right. We've had to pay the bills because, all of a sudden I was out of work. So I am honored that we can continue doing it, and the memories have been amazing.
Right. Dave, I think I speak for a lot of people within the Division III level. We really appreciate the work that you and Pat and Gordon and that your staff has done over the years and getting the name for Division III out there. You mentioned some of those names. It takes me back, having gone to Lynchburg College and worked at Lynchburg. And you talk about guys like Tom Belenga and Ben Strong and Brandon.
I dipped into the ODAC deep there, didn't I?
Yeah, those Virginia Wesleyan teams were really good. I mean, Ben Strong was one of the best Division III players I've ever seen. I mean, just those were some really, really good teams, and the depth at this level for the game of basketball is incredible. Not only on the men's side, but on the women's side. I remember seeing people like Megan Silva at Randolph-Macon play, and just amazing players that have really transformed their programs and in the level. So,
well, we just came out with our second all-decade team, and talking to Gordon Mann on Hoopsville the other day, going through that list of just the last 10 years of women's basketball players. I didn't do them enough service in my answers. I've been to, one women's Final Four and and a second, which counted, also had a championship, and a second women's championship game, only because we split our duties as a staff because the championships take place on the same weekend.
Right.
And so I'm at the men's side. That's where I've been, as I've said. The women opened up in 2013 when the men were going to Atlanta for their dual championship. The calendar allowed us to get to Holland, Michigan, and hope to see that. And then the other championship was when the women had the joint championship in Indianapolis, where Sydney Moss and Thomas More won the championship. By the way, the previous one, in case you think I don't remember, that was DePaul winning the championship. Williams and Amherst faced off in the third round game. It's about the only time I saw the third round game mean something.
Right. Yeah.
When Williams and Amherst, about halfway through that game, you saw all the women look at each other going, I'm not losing to them. And it was on. Right. But and then again, Sydney Moss at Thomas More. But you look through that all-decade team. That's just the 10 years. And it's insane. I'm looking it up quickly because I don't want to screw up names, and I hope you don't mind. But Sydney Moss, Chelsea Swears at Christopher Newport, Madison Temple, Thomas More, Melissa Toby at Montclair, and Carissa Vercake, who's now Ratliff at Calvin. Those are just the first team. And we have 5 teams of names that you just sit there, and the second I think of them, I'm like, oh, I remember this. I remember that. How great was that team? Or, man, that was a team that was good that just couldn't get over the hump. We've had some tremendous basketball players. And I think and this will speak for the sport across all sports, I should say. There are really good student athletes in Division III, really good student athletes who chose to go to Division III over Division I offers and over Division II offers. Right. And this is why I get passionate. I'm not passionate right now. Because we do have good student athletes who play tremendously good in their sports, who don't get the recognition they should be getting, and they're just as good as some of those at the Division I level. I'm not crazy. We don't get Duncan Robinsons all that often, and to be honest, Duncan Robinson is probably not in the NBA if he doesn't go to Michigan, if he doesn't get the strength training in the court and the extra year to become the player he has become. But he was just as dangerous a shooter. He just slashed more in Division III. He attacked the net more in Division III. He doesn't do that as much in the NBA. But there's also the Devin Georges of Division III, who went on to win 6 NBA championships, having never gone to a Division I school. Right. You go to football, there's a litany of guys who played Division III football who have made names for themselves in the NFL. Baseball certainly has its fair share of guys. Lacrosse is littered with Division III guys at the pro ranks. And I don't mean that lightly. If you don't see a guy drafted in the first round from a Division III school, that's a little bit of a surprise, to be honest. And that's true in a lot of sports. I think there was even a guy at Emory swimming who was lined up to make the Olympics or something like that. So it's just because we're Division III, as you know, doesn't mean there aren't tremendous athletes. And I love talking about them and trying to shine the light on them as best I can.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, I don't know if there's anybody as passionate about the level as, as you.
I'm not passionate.
Yeah, obviously, right. Last question for you, and this is a little bit of fun one, but you're a Baltimore guy, and
kind of by default, because I came here to college and I haven't found out how to get out of here.
Are you an Orioles fan? And if so, are they going to make the playoffs this year or what?
Well, let me preface this by saying I grew up in Chicago until till I was 11, and then my parents moved us to New England, down East Maine to be exact. So I'm a diehard Cubs fan.
Okay.
I hate saying I'm a Bears fan sometimes, but I am a Bears fan, a Hawks fan, and I really hate saying I'm a Bulls fan because I miss the days of the 90s. It was a different game then, though. I don't think we need that kind of basketball either. But I am an Orioles fan by default because I covered them for so long. And with the work I do during baseball season, I certainly see them a lot. Man, I said at the beginning of the year to some friends who thought I was crazy, I said, this is the kind of year that the Orioles could take advantage of. Right. They've got no names. They all feel it's almost like the Major League movie Indians team. Not that management is against them, but it's a bunch of guys no one knows who could absolutely go on a run. I like Brandon Hyde. I think he's a great manager. I think he's undersung as a manager. Granted, it's a little unfair. I've seen him up close. I really can't discuss why I've seen him up close, but I've seen him up close, like sitting next to me, doing his job. And I think he's got a good staff around him. The trick is when the pressure comes on at the end of September and the run to the playoffs, can they make it? The advantage is Major League Baseball has made it easier to get in. The disadvantage is they're in the toughest division period in the AL East. The advantage is there's an extra spot available. So why not? Sure, they can make it. I think they've got as good a chance of making as they don't. And I know that's hedging my bets a little bit here, but if you would talk to Orioles fans a month ago, they would have told you they'd maybe win 15 games.
Maybe.
They'd be at the bottom of the basement. They'd be an embarrassment to watch. And yet, outside of a sweep against the Marlins, who had a week and a half off before playing, the Orioles have been pretty fun to watch. It's been neat to see people kind of just take a head turn and go, wait a minute, really?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I don't know. I think it's fun. It's a little surreal. We're only playing 60 games.
Right.
But heck, they just took the Nationals to the woodshed, to be blunt. 11-0 in one game, beat them, came back to win the second one, and came back to win the third until a tarp malfunction.
Yeah.
But as a Cubs fan, I can't really get on their case because thanks to the Cubs in 2014, there is a rule about the tarp not stopping a game. That's all because of the Cubs. So I can't really get on the Nationals about that.
Well, Dave, we really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on with us. And you can hear Dave Sundays and Thursdays during the basketball season from 7 to 9. Yeah. That's November.
Whenever that is this year. We haven't figured that out yet.
But make sure to log on to d3hoops.com. Amazing resource for the game and then for the level, and then d3sports.com as well for all the sports around. And you get a lot of the big news about the NCAA that comes kind of onto that site. So again, Dave, thanks so much. You'll have to get you up here to Wilkes-Barre at some point for some games whenever that ends up.
It's been a while. It's been a while. I used to call some games up there. I remember being at King's football field a couple of times for games. I called one once. It's a great area up there. I've made some friends up there. I wouldn't mind getting back there. By the way, I know you had Dan Dutcher on this show, if memory serves.
Right.
Dan and I were talking. I don't know if he brought this up or if you had him on or not, but we really like Frank's suits during the Stag Bowl. The suit jacket.
Right.
Mwah. Absolutely perfect.
Well, we're supposed to talk to Dave tomorrow, so we're really excited to have him on. And
awesome.
I'll mention that. I'll definitely mention that to him, so he'll get a kick out of that. But Dave, thanks again so much for coming on with us, and we'll definitely catch up with you here soon.
Yeah, thanks for the time. I appreciate you reaching out. Good luck. Hopefully, we're talking sports soon. We're just going to have to kind of get through this in the meantime.
Big thanks to Dave McHugh from d3hoops.com for joining us here on the Leo's House Party podcast. We kind of got going there and went off a little tangent for a while, but it was really great to talk to Dave, a guy I've known now for a long time, going back almost 10 years. So really appreciate him joining us to talk a little basketball, kind of his thoughts on how things might end up going here this year and more. So, fifth episode here of the Leo's House Party podcast over the last month and a half or so. It's been going really well, and we'd like to appreciate say thanks for joining us here every week and tuning in. I think we've gotten really good feedback, and so as there are more opportunities for more guests to come on, please, if you are an alum or someone that's interested in joining us here on the podcast, please let me know. Send me an email, and we'd love to talk to you and possibly get you on the show and hear what your thoughts on Kings athletics in the college and how it has benefited you. And I'm sure there's lots of alumni out there that just want to tell us what they're doing nowadays, which is fine with me. We're trying to reach out to all of the alums out there that want to get connected back to the programs that they obviously held so close to them when they were here. And, connecting our alumni to our current students is going to be a priority in the coming months and years. And so we'd love to hear from you. All programs, doesn't matter what sport you played, we want to hear from you. So if you're listening, shoot me an email, Jamie Chagnon, that's JamieChagnon @kings.edu. and we will get you involved with something here on campus. But so far we've had a ton of alumni here on this podcast, and we want to get as many as we possibly can. So thanks again to our 3 guests for joining us today, and I think that will wrap us up. We hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. Labor Day is coming up here soon, and make sure to keep staying safe. Socially distance, 6 feet apart. Wear those masks, wash those hands, and be courteous. Say thank you when people do something nice for you. It goes a long way. Have a good one. Have a great day. Let's continue to be considerate and nice of each other, and let's get through this 2020 so that 2021 is a much better year. Thanks a lot for tuning in. You guys have a great one. Talk to you soon. Go Monarchs. The views and opinions by the host and guests of the Leo House Party podcast do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions of King's College. The Leo House Party podcast is produced and presented by the King's College Sports Information Office, and any redistribution or reproduction of content in any form is strictly prohibited without express written consent of King's Athletics. Follow King's Athletics on social media at King's Monarchs on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and also visit the online home of Monarch Athletics at kingscollegeathletics.com.